You know, I show up a lot of rage, maybe it's just probably back. All right, so if you want to start looking in your manual for the page we'll be using, hey Ben, come on in. It's the seat of the teacher, section 2.7. I think it might be page 55. Once upon a time, it was page 55. It's 57 now? Okay, thanks, Gabby. And we won't, it's just a section you can take notes on if you want. And if someone could do me a favor when Bethia gets here, if someone could run down, does anyone know how to lock this door?
Don't you just let it close on the way?
Well, she can't get in if yeah, no. Okay, well, hopefully no students will come in and interrupt us then, because I'm just gonna leave it unlocked then. Okay. Well, hi. You all feel very close. Like, usually groups are like spread out and all over, and you're like, we're tight. Well, it's so nice to see you all tonight. Hi. We are going to get started. So, as mentioned, we'll be referring to page 57. It's called Seat of the Teacher. This is just where we have some of the Sanskrit and some of the sutras for tonight. If you want to reference them as we're going through them, you don't have to. None of this is like a pressure kind of knowledge stuff, right? Like, there won't be a quiz, but it is there for you if you want it. And I'm just delighted to be with you all tonight, till late. You're used to it though, right? You've acclimated? Kind of, sort of. All right, so let's do this. I'm gonna bring in our attention. Let's do some pulling prana. Arms up overhead. Have you done all 3 sections yet? Oh, well, we will. You're about to. All right, so arms up overhead. I know this keeps slipping. I've never had such a hard time with it as I have tonight. So we'll see how long it lasts. You're going to just pump with your stomach, exhale with fists pulled down, inhale, release the belly and lift up about 15, nice and loud. Okay, here we go. And really imagine you're pulling prana in through the crown of your head, like just enough to make it till 9 and home. And into bed, but not to be up till 2 a.m. And then bring your arms down, rest with your eyes closed. All right, rest with your eyes closed, please. Thank you. Okay, so that part builds the prana. Now we'll focus it with the second and third steps. So you just bring your hands into fists. You can either kind of swallow your thumbs with the fists, never actually punch someone this way. It's a good way to break your thumb, or just don't punch someone. There's a better. This is like things my great grandma taught me once upon a time. All right, at the navel, or you can do thumbs up, whichever energetically right now is feeling a little better. We'll inhale with your eyes closed. You're just going to do a light retention of the breath. I know you've done a little of this. It's not until you're like gasping for air or turning blue. It's not like trying to get through the Eisenhower tunnel right up at Loveland, holding your breath as you do if you grow up here and you're a teenager, and it's probably not very safe. Okay, so go ahead and do that. When you are ready, you'll release. You'll bring your hands to your knees and you'll just close your eyes and let it integrate. Okay, nice big breath in, hands right in front of the navel, and just hold until it's right for you. Notice the energy, the prana consolidating around that navel point, pulling from your periphery toward center. And then give yourself a moment or two for that to integrate. And I like during these breaths in between to just notice, like, how does that simple little thing shift your energy? And sometimes when we say shift the energy, that sounds like a bigger thing than it is. It just means, how do you feel different now than you did 20 seconds ago? All right, step 3. This one, have you done this one? Okay, what you're gonna wanna do is not what you're supposed to do. You're gonna wanna do what we did at first, which was this, right? But instead, you're gonna hold your breath. So it's not gonna be, it's gonna be inhale, hold the breath, and this until you faint. Please don't do that. Just until you feel kind of good and energized and focused. And then again, let it integrate. Just notice, use it as like a little few breaths to be like, oh, this is what this did. This is how this changed me. Okay. So arms out, palms up, inhale, hold it, make a fist and pull it in. And then just keep going until it's right for you. You open up your hands when you reach out. And again, it's like you're pulling prana in toward yourself. With your eyes closed, if it's comfortable for you, I'd like you to just take a moment and think of a word that describes how you want to feel by the end of tonight's session. It could be joyful, it could be relaxed, it could be calm, it could be focused, whatever your word is. Right. Now on the count of 3, we'll open our eyes and everyone say your word. It'll be all at the same time, so you're not going to even understand anyone else's. 1, 2, 3. Joyful. Hi, we put it out there. We'll see. Did someone say confused? Or did it just sound confused because there were so many voices? I don't know. I'm like, I swear I heard confused. Do you really feel confused? Okay, so tonight's discussion is called Seat of the Teacher. And I want to invite you to do what you need to do for your body. This is not an active one. If you need to, stand up, if you find yourself getting tired and needing to stand or move, take a bathroom break, whatever you need to do, we'll take a break. And again, do what you need to do, right? So we'll take a break at some point. I'm not sure exactly. It'll kind of depend how it all shakes out. I'm not doing a traditional typical check-in right now because I want to get right to it. And I will ask you a question later that will be a bit of a check-in-ish. The seat of the teacher, this is really a talk that we do toward the end of training. Like, wow, it's wild, right? And it really is about taking that seat of a teacher. What does that mean in your life? Even if you're like, I don't want to teach, guess what? Once people know you've taken a teacher training, a lot of times they put you smack dab in the seat and they're like, my neck, honey, come on, I'm your mom. Give me a few things that'll help, that kind of thing. So, and also once people know you're a yoga teacher, they I hate to say it, but they watch you a little differently. They're noticing behavior and things like that. So there's just this a little bit of responsibility for the tradition of yoga and how we comport ourselves and in just kind of how we think about how we're going about lives in the world. It doesn't mean holding ourselves to a standard of perfection or anything like that, but so today's discussion will be in 2 parts. The first part is really taking a bit from the sutras, and just to give you a little more sutra talk, because what else are you going to do on a Tuesday night? So talk some sutras, right? But to try to pull them into maybe to hopefully get you a little motivated around it, the idea of yoga and what we're actually doing as teachers, and then maybe give you something a little practical to hang on to from the sutras. Then we will shift gears, and at that point, we have a section on the very practical. So it's, I'll just give you an idea of kind of my big topics are self-care for teachers, fears of teachers, managing your class, and a little on feedback, although not much, because now you just had your thing on Sunday. There's just a tiny bit I add to that. But that part is also a really good time. I want to know what your questions are. So that I save that for second because it just tends to, I don't want to put you to sleep with yoga not that I intend to at all tonight, I hope, but I know the closer we get to that 9 o'clock hour, the harder it can be. So we'll do the yoga philosophy stuff first. And that's the plan. So let's start, let me start with a question for you. And by the way, this is not a trick question. There's no wrong answer. There's like a answer that's kind of typical, but you get to have your own answer. What is the goal or your goal with yoga? Let me just hear some popcorn answers. Why do you do yoga? What's that?
Knowledge of self.
Knowledge of self. Nice. Thanks, Ben. Yeah.
Connect with my body and be less reactive as a person.
Good. Connect with your body, less reactive. Thank you.
Liberation from suffering.
Liberation from suffering. That's the classic answer, right? Too. That's the one really that if we are looking at the traditions of yoga, there's a lot they're going to argue about within the traditions. It's amazing. It's like yoga and it's like any philosophical system or systems. There's arguing, there's fighting to a degree, but one thing it's all agreed upon is there's some kind of end goal of liberation from suffering. What kind of suffering has yoga liberated you from? Like being less reactive is certainly a kind of suffering, right? What else? Yeah, those expectations that can be just punishing, really, right? Yeah. What else?
Criticism.
Criticism of yourself, others, both, maybe? Yeah, all of it.
Pain.
Pain, physical, emotional?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is really, as I think as yoga teachers, one of the things we want to do is to keep this in the back of our minds, right? Our students are coming to us, even if, again, you didn't sign up to be a teacher and your mom's just like, but come on, like, give me a few things. It's for some kind of level of liberation from suffering, whether it's that big, like, enlightenment and there's no more suffering at all anymore. That's cool if you get there in this life, and more power to you. But there's also along the way all of these little steps and these little releases of suffering that we can experience and receive through our yoga practice. And I would just submit to you that even though most of you were pretty quiet about the question, you wouldn't be here now if yoga had not liberated you or did not continue to give you the tools to liberate yourself, really. And that's what it is, because it's a very empowering practice. It's not like a magic wand that liberates you. It gives you tools, and you really liberate yourself from some level of suffering, right? And that's really what's bringing our students back again and again and again. There's much more efficient ways to burn calories if we're talking about asana, right? There's much more efficient ways to even get limber, right? If you want to be a contortionist, trust me, there's much faster ways to get really bendy. And like we talked about last time we saw you, they might not serve you very well a few decades down the line. But there are, if those are the goals, there's faster and easier means. Now, do students always know? It's kind of this weird thing where it's like, why am I coming back to make these weird shapes and breathe loudly in a room with strangers? Right? Like when you just, it's this thing that's like, what's going on? But that's really when we as teachers can remember, like, what is bringing people back is on some level this either a seeking of that some freedom of suffering, or actual they are getting some level of liberation from suffering. It can really help us get our heads right, because all we have to do then is sit back and really create the circumstances to let the yoga do the work. It can actually take a lot of pressure off of us. It could sound like a lot of pressure, like, oh my gosh, I have to relieve them of their suffering. No, all we have to do is maintain our own practices enough to where we can come in and be steady. We can hold space. We can create a space that might allow for those precious little moments of that liberation, of that remembering of the true self, which we'll get into in a moment. So, I have a bad habit in this one of just going off topic or ahead of myself. So just forgive me, because this one where I have to refer to my notes every now and then to get myself. Yeah. All right. So it can help us as yoga teachers. I want to talk about the first two sutras when we talk about this idea of liberation of suffering, because just to review them, and one of them you may not have had yet if you haven't done the video that it's in, but also they can be inspiring, they can be touchstones for us as yoga teachers. So the first sutra, and I wrote this out as phonetically as I can, it's Atha. Say that with me. Atha. So we want to say, because we're English speakers, whether it's our first language or not, if we have that, we tend to want to say Atha. It's Atha. And I'll show you when it's the sound with a lowercase a, and when it's the with an uppercase a. That's my little thing that I'm doing for you up here. So we have Atha. Now, do you know what this means? Anyone off the top of your head? I'm hoping you say no, honestly. Great. We're going to do a little experiment then, because Patanjali, this is the very first sutra, and Patanjali, I mean, these are terse little aphorisms. There is no word that goes to waste. There's no line that goes to waste. And we start right with this word. Now, in Sanskrit, the word is the vibration of the thing itself. If I'm talking to Aaron, that's just a label, right? That's just a word that Aaron's parents said, here. This is going to describe you, but it's not the actual vibration. It's not Ben's actual. No, it may change your experience in life and kind of change who you are, being named Ben versus being named Paul or something, right? But it's not the same vibration. And here's what I mean. So because Sanskrit in yoga, it's believed things begin on a vibrational level and then get densified until they actually exist in the physical realm. Sanskrit is the language of that. So I want you to see what you notice in your body when you say Atha. Okay, so go ahead and just sit up, and you can close your eyes again, and we'll say the first part together. So after me, just repeat Say it again and notice, what does your body do? Now say ta. 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 Okay, thank you. Now tell me, what did you notice, if anything, happening in your body? It doesn't have to be profound. It can literally be like,
Vibration,
yeah. Say it.
I can't.
What does that ta do? So it's the if you were going to draw directions with arrows, which way does the go? Which way does the ta go? Out or down? Ta. Can you feel that? Okay. Ta means here. Or just kidding, it doesn't. It means now. I often say here and now when I say this, but it means now. Now, what's so interesting about Sanskrit is, and this being the first word in the sutras, is Patanjali is really saying, and I'm sorry for those of you who can't see this very well. When we're done, we can take a picture too if you want it. Atha really encapsulates now. We have I mean, think about every single moment has within itself encapsulated a birth, a little pause that is life, and then what? Release. So, atha, by the way, this can be a great word to theme with. And Om is similar. Om kind of has this in it too. It's the Aum, has kind of all three phases. But so we have now, and I'll come back to this, Yoga Nush Asana. Yoga Nush Asana.
Awesome.
Yeah, and this just means now yoga, basically now the practice of yoga begins. Now the study of yoga begins. And it's sounds kind of like not much, right? Like, okay, now the practice of yoga begins. But really, Patanjali, again, he's not throwing anything away. So many of the people who, scholars and commentators and practitioners will say, you know, Patanjali is throwing us into the deep end. And if you don't get the first thing right away, then he's like, okay, then try this. Well, what's the deep end? Be here now. When you are here now, where is your suffering? Much of our suffering is by attending to the past mentally or worrying about the future, right? You've all heard this, you know this. This is nothing too terribly profound, and yet it's so hard. How often are you actually here now? In just completely in the present moment. So there's a suggestion that when we are here now, we're good. Now the yoga begins. Like when we're here now, the yoga begins. Now is the yoga, right? It's also the other thing I want to tell you about this, to use as a reminder for yourself as a yoga teacher. Now begins the study of yoga. It's meant to kind of kick you in the butt a little bit and be like, hey, wake up. Like, and remember, yoga believes what, this is your only lifetime? No. Yoga believes you've had many, many, many. You can take that or leave that, but believe this. Think of what it took for your great-grandparents. Every second of their lives had to happen and unfold the way it did for their children's lives too, for their children's lives too, for you to be here. And it goes back like that to forever. If 1 second of time had been different, you would not be here right now as you know yourself to be. If humans had not developed thumbs, right? I mean, it goes on and on and on. It will blow your mind if you really start to think about it. So now, after all of this time, after there were little amoebas crawling out of the pre-existence, the slimy, swampy stuff, and then eventually developing spines and eventually even if that's not anything you believe in, for your great-grandparents, your great-great-great-grandparents to have had the lives they have, to have made one choice differently, you wouldn't be here. It's that simple. That is profound. And then that you get to study yoga. Wow, right? So, and I want to add to this too. Not only did all of that have to happen for you to be here now, and you and you and you and you and right, all of us to be here now, getting to study yoga in this life right now in this time, but to be in a world, in a place where we can access it. 200 years ago, you wouldn't, even if, okay, pretend everything else was the same, and we know it couldn't have been 200 years ago, but let's pretend it was. Yoga wasn't accessible to most people. And then there's good and bad in all of these things, right? But you know, you had to be because of the caste system too. In India, you had to, of course, first of all, most people were themselves Indian or of a region thereabouts for the yoga we're studying. Very, not always, but at one point became male dominated. Of a certain caste, you couldn't just be anyone and go study yoga. There was a lot of privilege around that, even if it meant giving everything away and going into the woods or whatever. Like it takes so much for you to be here now studying yoga. So this is also just like this, when you are having moments, and you will as a yoga teacher, where you get that big, I don't wanna. Right? Like work was so hard today and now I have to go put these people into weird shapes. Tell them to breathe loud. I don't wanna, right? Like this is one I want you to, that atha. First off, the I don't want to is thinking about the future and thinking about it and worrying about it. But also this atha, this now reminds us like, hey, we get to do this. This is a privilege. This is a true privilege. And even if you never teach, I hope that this can just keep you when you feel uninspired or you lose your practice, as it can happen. It happens. We have these busy lives and yoga can come and go, but this can get you back to it. And when we keep ourselves inspired, that really sets our students up for success. Why? Why do you think that is?
Because we set an example,
Yeah. What else?
bringing your own baggage into it.
Yeah, it's not making it about, oh, today I had this and that person in the store bumped me, or, you know, what else?
Energetically, you're you're creating a safe space for them. So it's not about you, you're really now in the present with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, all three of you. So well said, just right down the row there. But it is true, this is just a way for us to remember, like, the service that it is to teach yoga and to kind of get out of our own way, let the yoga do the work, and to, when we can bring enthusiasm to it, then it really does set our students up for more success. They can feel it. They can feel it if we don't want to be there. They can absolutely feel it. So this is redirecting those vrittis. Oh goodness, what's it vritti? That's been a long time. The close, the movements of it. Yes, which you're like, but that's what I was miming. Yeah, you were, you got it. Yeah, so that leads us to our next one. Just as a little reminder here, is we have yoga chitta. It's really just yoga chitta, but it makes this sound the way they kind of come together. So yoga chitta. What's chitta? Say that answer again for me. What was the,
Oh.
without
mind
this?
stuff?
Yeah, mind stuff, yoga mind stuff.
Sure.
Yep. Vritti is what? There's our movements of the mind. I'm just gonna draw them. Movements of the mind. And Nirodha is what? This motion means. Yeah, stopping, cessation, a stopping up. So, and by the way, if you're like, I don't remember this, it's okay. Some of you, this is gonna be your kind of thing to remember, and some of you it's not. You get this one 3 times in here, and one of the times was way back, like your second week, I think, with when Caleb did his teach out with us for Sankalpa. So basically, Patanjali now is saying, hey, okay, if you can't quite exactly get yourself here now, if you need a little more instruction, let me tell you what yoga is. Okay, it just means get that mind stuff to stop moving. Slow it down. When it does have to move, pick your vrittis, pick the movements of the mind. Don't just let the mind move you. through the world. And that's what we're all really doing most of the time, right? Is letting our mind just drive our body through the world. And we're just every now and then like, oh, hey. So Yogashchitta Vritti Nirodha is this one is a nice one to review because we also, since we want to create this space for students to have little moments of liberation, right? Or maybe big ones. I mean, I don't want to limit it and be like, oh, just give them a half a second and you're good. I mean, who knows? They may just be like, they just may leave their body. No, let's hope they don't leave their bodies, but they may, just have some huge enlightenment during it. And that'd be cool too. But chances are it's going to be these little moments that just bring a little more slowness, a little more cessation of the mind stuff that brings a little more calm, a little more peace, a little more liberation from suffering to their lives. Now, when the mind stuff gets really still, it's that you remember the pond analogy. Caleb had a little handout for you, right? This mind stuff, it's like that pond and it's moving and it's moving. And our yoga practices are designed to get it to go. Or to when it needs to move. Because like if you're at Walmart buying groceries, you kind of need your mind stuff moving. And by the way, mind stuff even includes the body. So, but to move more slowly so we're not as reactive. We're not as quick to be like, hurt or angry or whatever. Does this mean this happens all the time? No, it's a practice. But the more we do it, the more adept we get at going, oh, that's my mind moving. I don't have to choose that. Or, ooh, I chose that and it maybe wasn't the best idea. Next time, maybe I'll choose something else, right? Now, when it gets totally still, we are more clearly seeing, right, that reflection of our true and abiding nature. That's supposed to be a moon, that's supposed to be a pond, and that's supposed to be the reflection of the moon in the pond, in case you're wondering. So the more still it is, the more slowly it moves, or the rittis are moving, the more we're remembering and in touch with our true and abiding nature. Yoga very clearly, just to reiterate this stuff, because I think this stuff can really, this stuff may not sound practical, but it's some of the most practical stuff in my life. The more I can go, oh, that's not me, that's anger. That's an emotion, or that's not me, that's my past and my brain thinking that the past is happening now, but the past isn't happening now. Okay. So the more we get to slow down, the more we connect with and identify with and remember that we are something greater. Those movements are just an experience. The pond is just an experience. Our true and abiding nature, in many traditions, is known as Sat Chit Ananda. Let's say that one. Sat Chit Ananda. Yeah. So remember the little A's are like the and cup. Sat. Let's say that. You want to try the whole thing? Okay, I'll say it and then I'll say it with you. Sat Chit Ananda. Sat Chit Ananda. And who remembers what Sat means, or kind of loosely translates as? Anyone? Yeah, truth. Chit. Awareness, consciousness. And Ananda. So again, this is not a thought, this is not a feeling, it is in yoga and people who've experienced it. And by the way, again, you get glimpses of this in yoga, right? Do you have, and I hope you have, and maybe you don't even know you've had them because they've been so fleeting and they haven't started to really pile up on themselves, but these moments where you really get this. Stay with the yoga and you will. If you're not quite there yet, keep going, because you will get that. You will slow down your mind more and more. You will have a moment of, that stuff, it's like, whoa, I am it. Like, I'm not experiencing bliss. I am bliss. That's completely different than I am blissful. I'm having bliss. I'm experiencing bliss. Okay. So the more in our own lives we're able to attend to this sutra again, the more we remember what about ourselves? Our true nature. Well, what's that going to do for our students? How does that show up in the classroom when we're teachers who we really try to attend to this stuff and we're like, ooh, honey, my vrittis this morning were, I'm so sorry, I was a real jerk. How does this start to show up in our lives and then as yoga teachers?
Say that it like becomes very inviting when you slow down, you just kind of radiate an inviting presence, kind of like Erica, for instance.
Mhm.
Like every single time I see Erica, it's just, hi, I'm so happy you're here, you know.
Yeah, you can, students can, they can just feel your attention. When our minds, when we're slowed down, if I put my attention on you and I'm not also thinking about 27 other things, you feel it, right? And that can be a really great thing too. Erica's really, and she has a lot of that Ananda coming through her that I think really does show up.
Creates a positive impact.
Yeah, it creates a positive impact. Say more about that. Why do you think that is, or how?
I can take the yoga session and after that, you know, it could be just a combination of same moves that I've done in other yoga sessions.
Mhm.
But the energy of the instructor or how I was guided through comes out their personality
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
that's
I think you're right, Ben. I think that makes a lot of sense and I think it's true. And it is, I mean, again, it's that thing like, our students they can feel us, right? I mean, you get instincts about people. Now, sometimes instincts are just the vritti telling you, oh, this person reminds me of this person, but your instincts are actually totally wrong. You're just living in the past and you're putting it on the present, right? And you're shoving that person in a box. Yeah, exactly. But if you, but we also just get a feel and there's a feeling of care. There's a feeling of attention, of presence that the more, and so this is why it's just important as yoga teachers to be attending to our own practices because they are helping us to do this, which then shows up in the classroom. And the more present we are, really the more we're again able to possibly facilitate an experience in which students get into the deep thought, have a few moments of Satchit Ananda. Again, it's really not our responsibility. We can't do this for another person, but what we can do is take the best care of ourselves, our own minds and hearts, so that they are more likely to move themselves into this state that supports this realization. And I would say then that if we can do that, we've really met our goal as yoga teachers. But what do you think our goal of yoga teachers is? Oh. What do you think it is, Karen?
I feel like, to give them what they've come for is either like an intense, or a nice amount of connection, or even maybe just glimpses
Mhm.
of it, but I feel like everyone's there for their own specific reason, but ultimately the connection that everyone gets together in that moment. I don't know how to say it, but that's where I'm going with it.
It's a great start. What else can we add to this? Yeah.
What it is that, and how you're talking about continuing our own practices, that you're nurturing a little spark of light, and then you're allowing them to take a little spark of light out into the world too, possibly
Mhm.
nurturing sparks of light.
Absolutely. That nurturing sparks of light. What else? Did you have something?
Yeah, I did. I think that the role of the yoga teacher is like to keep their students accountable. I've always felt that that was a big thing. It's like accountability. And not necessarily in like a rigid kind of a way, but in a dedication to practice, not
Mhm.
just like the asanas, like
Mhm.
yoga is more than the physical.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. And I think too, I'll just add to that. Something I say a lot and I really believe is yoga is the art of personal responsibility. It can be brutal because it's on, like my teacher isn't gonna liberate me from suffering. I have to get myself there. And it's still my job to do the work. But as teachers, can we support that and make that a little easier, a little more likely to happen? Absolutely. And part of that is holding people accountable, there's a lot around that, and more might come up in the second section on that too. And all of what you're speaking to is keeping ourselves there, right? We can't have expectations for them if we're not doing it ourselves. And I think too, the other thing I just want to say, my feeling is when I'm teaching any kind of yoga class, this is a yoga class, right? Is I want students to come back for more yoga. It doesn't have to be to me, it doesn't have to be to Cameo, but I believe in it, and it has been so informative and powerful in my life that I want that for everyone. So it's important for me to show up in the right way so that I don't inadvertently shut the door for someone too.
I just wanted to, excuse me, Adam, like, how you were saying, every second up until this point, like, now, you're kind of somebody's now at that.
Ooh,
Especially if they're a first time student, you could really just change, not in like a self-important kind of way, but to facilitate a positive change in the trajectory of even just one person.
yes, beautifully said. Yeah, and that's why it really is. It's one of those things, and I think, Austin says this. He says, we don't take ourselves seriously, but we take the yoga seriously. And I think so much of that is because there is this recognition of how, we all know we're here. I don't have to sell you on it, but just how powerful it is and how also fragile, especially newer students, relationships can be to yoga. And, but honestly too, anyone along the way, you catch someone who just had a horrible day. And then if you're in a funky state as a yoga teacher, that can be an excuse to be like, screw it, I'm never going back. It's not worth it. Right? So, and I really believe in the art of personal responsibility, that's a yogic thing, but I also am a realist. And I know that, the way we treat people and the way we show up really can have that profound effect. And I love that you said that. And I'm going to include that next time I teach it, and I'll give you credit. Yeah, no, but that's really beautiful. Okay. Can we shift gears a little? Anything else you want to say on that or to that for these first two sutras? Okay. So I want to talk about Sutra 1.33 and then we'll take a break. You good till then? Okay, as long as it doesn't get too loud. I know we're about to have class get out, but we'll see how it goes. So Patanjali doesn't give many actual instructions in the sutras. There's not a lot of do this. It's more kind of like, well, just still your chitta. And then it's like assumed that you've then had a teacher do all these like practices with you, right? But there is, and there's also not a lot, people studying this would have been, they weren't ascetics like who gave up everything and went and lived in the woods necessarily, but there was a very insular kind of lifestyle. But yeah, they were around people too. So there's not a lot about how do you do it out in the world. There's some, I don't hold me to task on that because there is, but it's not a lot. And Sutra 1.33 really gives us this. Now, the sutra itself, will anyone just read the whole thing? It's on that page 57. Does anyone, just so you can get a different voice than mine?
Cultivating attitudes of friendliness towards the happy, passion for those in distress, light and the virtuous, and equanimity for the non-virtuous. Mind stuff retains its undeserved.
Nice, Ben. Thank you. So this is a sutra that's really telling us how to go out and live in the world. But without a bit of contemplation, it falls pretty flat and it's pretty kind of surfacey. It's one that can really support us as yoga teachers so that we can show up with the most calm chitta possible, right? The most, and by the way, that doesn't mean you're not vibrant and alive and this and that, but I think you know what I mean. So by doing all of these things, when we do these things, there's 4 things listed. The mind stuff, right? The chitta, it retains its calmness. What did we just say happens up here when the mind stuff is calm? What do we remember about ourselves? True and abiding nature. So what it's saying is by doing these things, we're going to do a better job of slowing down the mind and better connecting with our true and abiding nature. But there's also an implication that if we don't do these things, what happens? Yeah, you're like, you're not calm, that's for sure. And if your mind's not calm, what happens to that true and abiding nature? Yeah. So this one is often called the locks and the keys. And the locks and the keys is because there are situations in life that Patanjali's broken down into about 4 of them that we often come up against that can be locks. What are they locking us out of? Well, the calm mind state. They're locking us out from remembering our true and abiding nature. And so I've got to rearrange my situation here, excuse me. So, the locks are encountering people, the possible locks, right? To remember, locks to what? To a calm mind state. So the locks to the calm mind state include, okay, encountering people who are happy. Why would that not keep you calm? Encountering people who are suffering or distressed, encountering people who are virtuous and non-virtuous. Basically, what he's saying is human interactions can really screw you up. Whether someone's happy or not happy, it might mess with your mind. Whether someone is virtuous or non-virtuous, it might mess with your mind state. Do you know this to be true? Yeah, I mean, right? Like it's one thing, one of my favorite writers at Matt Eshwaran, who maybe you've heard about in here a little bit, but he talks about like, it's great to go in a cave and get undisturbed mind stuff. But what happens as soon as you walk down the hill and the first person gets in your way on the path? Right? And it is like his whole thing is like it's out in the world, like as householders, this is the stuff. this is where we really get to get to practice it. Yeah, oh, traffic. I mean, we could go on and on, right? In fact, we will, Ben. We're gonna add to this because, so what Patanjali's saying is these are locks. But by very intentionally employing these attitudes, which are just vrittis, by choosing our vrittis, then we can stay calm rather than having a disturbed mind state. As a teacher, I think this one can be really good to think about before you teach. Here's why. Let's go through them. Now, as we go through these, I want you to consider both a kind of student who fits the description, who you might not be able to retain a naturally and easily a calm mind state around, and why, as well as maybe other situations in life. So why would someone's happiness be an obstacle to our own good, calm mind state? Why, Ben? You got laughing already. Why?
Because, you know, people could be walking around like, what are they?
Yeah,
So it's a thing.
it's not everyone's thing, but happiness can piss other people off. Damn it. But it's true. I mean, I'm sorry to say it that way, but it's, have you ever known anyone who is just like, they might be a big example of that, but to some degree, that cartoonish example really lives within all of us. It's not always there, but I think it's there enough to where if you have a day or you've gotten horrible, maybe it's only about certain situations. Maybe, I've worked with many, people who wanted children who could not have them for different reasons. So the happiness and joy a friend's experiencing upon finding out they're pregnant creates a disturbed mind state, right? Now, think as a yoga teacher, what kind of student, and by the way, this perception of happiness isn't always true. We could think, oh, they must be so happy they've got the Mercedes, whatever that I always wanted. I don't even know a Mercedes to name to tell you, but pretend that's your thing. Or that big house on the hill, or the hot partner, or the job, or the body, or the whatever. This is also pointing out, by the way, we're perceiving that as happiness. Is it actual happiness? No, you can have all those things and still be really unhappy, right? We know this. But whether someone's happy or not, if we perceive it as such, we can get real in our own heads about it. So what's a kind of yoga student? And this isn't an admission, by the way. This isn't like you going, well, here's my inner demons and this is what would make me feel jealous or upset or whatever. But just pretend you were human and a certain kind of student showed up. What is something that might make you, your perception of their happiness might make you go, hmm. Do you have any thoughts?
Experience, my husband. So he uses jokes a lot and like his exuberance to kind of mask. And so I could see where like if you're trying to like teach in class and like keep everybody calm, but somebody's like joking around or.
Okay, so even that kind of happiness too, and you just be like, I've got a plan. You're messing with my plan,
Yeah,
right?
like, it's so hard to like, I understand that you need this
Mhm,
happiness or this, you know, exuberance.
mhm.
But there's a moment where it's like, okay, I'm gonna.
Right, yeah. And that'll come into later when we talk about managing your class, because students really do want you to manage your class. So if something's getting out of control, to subtly let the person know or something if they're throwing you too off course. One example I hear often in this class is and this is the pose that comes up is handstand. a student who can come in and do handstand. Because I don't know why that's perceived as such a, I want to get that pose, that then when you see someone come in and they're just like, or they walk up the steps and handstand and they're checking in and handstand, right? And you're just like, I've been working on handstand for 10 years, you jerk. Of course, you know they're not really a jerk, and you know their handstand doesn't make them happy. But my point is, we can perceive certain successes, certain things in the yoga classroom as happiness. And it might bring, by the way, there is a sense of joy and fun in doing a handstand too. But we can get a little prickly and a little, what's the word? Jealous. The big thing that can get into the way for our own state of calm when we see a happy person, even the example of someone who is having fertility struggles, finding out their friend is pregnant. It's jealousy, right? I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying that's what's happening here is the mind waves are moving with an I want that thing and I don't get it. It can be, I want that pair of Lululemon pants and I can't afford them. And this person shows up in a new outfit every week. I don't know what the thing is. That person looks amazing in their Lululemon pants and I don't look that way and I want to. In my mind, that's what amazing is and I'm not there. And all of these things can be perceived as happiness and they can get us out of that calm state to where our little bits of ickiness or jealousy. Again, can a student feel that if we're a little different with them than we are with the rest of the class? Not always, but generally, they get on some level, they're picking it up. Yeah.
Sure, mind me of little segment of instruction years given. Remember, back up.
Mhm.
You given us suggestions on how to comment the class
Mhm.
or when someone is doing something, you would say something like nice focus.
Yeah.
As opposed to off the handstand or, oh man, that's, because I see the wheel and I can't do the wheel. But
Yeah.
so good. And it was like a suggestion, but I can see it now corresponding to
Yes.
things inside me. I want to professionally, for the whole class, keep it, just kind of locked in a way that, hey, nice focus and can comment on it because it's natural.
Yes. And Ben, you all are bringing such good stuff tonight. I just want to say, because you're absolutely right. It's not just watching what students might bring up jealousy or envy within ourselves and kind of preparing ourselves for that. But it's also watching how our language might invite that within other students. So if we're only valuing through our language or our attitudes, students who can do certain things, then other students, it's hard for them to retain the calm mind stuff too, right? Yeah, thank you for that. So in this case, Patanjali says the key is friendliness. Friendliness. So I liken it to, and what you'll want to do, and I really think before you teach, because I promise the person who will test you on this will show up soon. And you'll be sitting here thinking, it's not gonna bother me, nothing's gonna bother me, I'm gonna be fine. And then third class, you're like, oh, that's it. So the point of this conversation is to get you thinking now so that you are prepared, so that your vrittis aren't completely disturbed by it, and instead you have a plan in place. And you notice that vritti disturbance of jealousy, envy, or even just curmudgeoniness, like, how dare you be happy, I had a crap day, whatever it is, you're prepared, and the preparation is friendliness. But what does that really mean? And oftentimes, since jealousy can be really the problem here, is that even if you don't know the person, practice being as happy for them for having this as you would if it were your best friend. Now, if you examine your heart and you're like, but I'd be jealous of my best friend, then find someone you wouldn't be. You know, right? Like, cause sometimes you can examine your heart and be like, yeah, that'd kind of make me mad too if it were them, right? And this is what's hard about this work, is it's being really kind of brutally honest with ourselves. But who can, like, I mean, if nothing else, it's like, if someone comes in and won the lottery, you're gonna treat them as if they're like, if you have like my dog, I'm an animal person, but I happen to always have dogs. And like, if my dog like is having a super happy day, I want to just find like that. I would never take that joy away. Like, can you get into that space in your heart where you're like, I would never, I'm just like, I am so happy for you that you got your Lululemon pants, that I'm as happy as I am for my dog when she gets to play with her teddy bear. That kind of like, that just being so happy for someone else you love. And it takes, by the way, vrittis don't just naturally redirect, it takes practice. So practice it out in the world, practice it in advance. Imagine situations in your head. We're very creative beings. We can get those vrittis moving without reality happening at all. But I mean, you can sit and imagine the person who's going to make you the most jealous or envious without them actually coming in, and you'll get the vrittis moving. By that, I mean, you're going to feel an emotional reaction, and then you're going to practice turning it around. Yeah? Sound good? All right, we'll get through the next three a little faster. I like to take time on that one because I think it just takes, we can kind of get into the whole concept that way. The next is we are to have compassion for the suffering or those, what did I give you for, oh, those in distress. Well, duh, don't we always have compassion for people who are suffering?
It's easy to say, but it's not.
Yeah, it is easy to be like, "Arr." Well, we'll get to that with non-virtuous. We will get to that with non-virtuous. Suffering though, and we could argue that non-virtuous behavior stems from suffering, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Will someone give me a phone call, and we're going to do the old-fashioned phone? Call me and ask me how I'm doing. Hello? Ooh, we got sound effects. Hello?
Hello.
Oh my gosh, I am so glad you finally called. My day has been horrible. I woke up and first thing, my dog peed on the floor and I stepped right in it. And then my husband. Do you get my point? Yeah, are there people who test your sense of compassion in life?
Yes.
Okay, that's what this is about. Now, to be clear too, it doesn't, sometimes, by the way, I want to be really clear with this because I feel like yoga teachers can take this one too far and maybe naturally do in their lives anyway, and they have no boundaries. It's okay to have boundaries. You can be compassionate and have boundaries. And I want to tell you right now, if you are the person who, like, random people are telling you about all the suffering they have and you cannot escape them, you know, the energy vampire types, do you know these people? You gotta look. Yeah. You've been that person? Okay, well, good, you're learning about yourself. But you get compassion fatigue, right? And it's because, who have you not had compassion for?
Right.
And you were suffering through their endless going on. Now, it doesn't mean we don't have compassion and we can't say things in a compassionate way. But if you are that person who like you run into someone you haven't seen in 10 years at the grocery store, and all of a sudden you're in the aisle for 35 minutes hearing every horrible thing that's happened or whatever. If that's you, you are also going to be the teacher who, and most students don't do this, most are very respectful. But the one who doesn't will find you. And they really believe you're there to listen to them after class or before class or whatever. And so also, so I want to put a little asterisk next to this one to say, think about your out right now because you don't want to get into compassion fatigue with this business. This will burn you out on teaching. Because you're gonna dread coming, because you're like, oh my, I had this early on, I had a student who every week it would just be like, and I had to really learn the skills to be like, hey, I need to lock up, I'll walk you out to your car and then I'm going. Or, hey, I need to get home to my dog, she's hungry and needs to get outside, let's walk outside together. Would you like to walk out, or would you like to hang up until I lock up and then go? You can also say things, if someone's really leaning on you like a therapist, you get to say, and you might want to write this phrase down if you're like, oh, this is gonna be me, someone's gonna try to turn me into their therapist. You get to say, that's really beyond the scope of what I can do. That is beyond the scope of what I can do. Or something along those lines, like, I am so sorry you're going through that. It's really beyond the scope of what I can do. I can't, because people will want your advice or things like that. And it doesn't mean you can't give advice, but it means know what your boundaries are and know what's appropriate professionally too. But even just being like, hey, can I get you do you have a resource for this? Or, it sounds like you have a lot you need to talk about, and for me, like, I need to go. I'm sorry, I can't stay with you, but for me, nothing's helped more than whatever the thing is. Journaling, therapy, Like, think about what your response is going to be and then literally say it out loud, or it's not going to be there. It's just like practicing. I'll get you in just a sec. It's like practicing your sequence. It'll be locked in your brain to where your mouth cannot access it when you're stressed out because the person has you cornered. Okay, there's lots of ways around this. I've heard so many over the years. Do you have one?
Yeah, I used to work as a medical records technician at USAFA. And so some of the things the cadets tell you is
Oh, yeah.
insane. Some of the things, especially older retired veterans, who will openly tell you they feel abandoned by the clinic because the clinic mainly caters to incoming cadets.
Sure.
Because veterans have the option to go off base, but a lot of them don't. Because
So what do you say? What's your?
I'm so sorry that you feel like that. Unfortunately, I can't help, but I can direct you to somebody who can.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you can find your thing to say. Exactly.
I also had the question.
If you can direct them. If you can't, then don't say that part.
Yeah, I can't direct them to- would it be like rude or over the line to be like, I would highly recommend therapy?
If you said it that way, yes. Remember, we're practicing compassion. That sounds smug and rude. So you have to watch your tone, right? That would be really hurtful.
Right.
And so there is a way to say, I want to say this really delicately. You have so much going on. And it is beyond the scope of what I can do, but I really want to see you get help. And I know therapy can help people. Something like that, to really acknowledge, like, wow, this is hard for you, then to say, but it's beyond anything I have training for, and I really want to see your suffering ease. So I would suggest this. Are you for what? You're like, I need this all day, every day. Yeah. It's beyond the scope of what I'm trained to do is a phrase that can really help. So again, it doesn't mean we don't have compassion. We're not going to be like, okay. I mean, we want to shut it down before it gets to the point where we snap, honestly, because we will snap. Either internally and start to hate teaching, or externally and be rude to a student, right? And we don't want to do that. So we have to really watch that within ourselves. All right, 2 more, and I promise these 2 will go faster. You've been great, and I want to get you on a break. We want to.
Is the why boundaries?
Oh, the why, so many things. I mean, a lot of times it's just that energy vampire thing. right? Like it's draining to us. It can be also just, it can also be like sometimes someone just really, sometimes we're being selfish, not always, but sometimes we are. And that's the thing, is kind of getting between this, like, am I being draining? Is this a boundary versus am I just really being self-absorbed right now and too fixated on getting home and watching the latest episode of blah, 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 rather than like giving a human 2 more minutes of my time. I don't know. And for you, that's whatever. What's watching what?
No, I'm just saying this.
So, oh, bad. So this one, I would say there's several, but a lot of it too is just, it's like that feeling of annoyance. And it can just, there's a lot to it, but any of those, there's, in fact, many of these aren't gonna have just one why, and that's another thing for you to think about too, as you're considering these. All right, so we want to have compassion for the meaning too. If I were overstepping my boundaries and exhausting someone, first off, you are showing compassion by drawing boundaries, because otherwise you're teaching them it's okay to keep doing this to other yoga teachers. Remember that. Show compassion for the other yoga teachers, but also for them, because who wants to go around being the person that every yoga teacher is like, oh gosh, no one wants that, right? So it actually is, sometimes compassion can be a little hard. It can be, but it's how we deliver it. We want to think about that. Okay. The virtuous. Why are the virtuous so hard to deal with?
Sometimes they come off a little like holier than thou, especially if you're feeling real low. And they come in, they're like, yeah, I did my meditation this morning, and they mean it in a good way, but you're like.
Yeah. It's kind of that self-comparison stuff, right? Sorry, my writing gets worse as I get lower. It brings up for us a lot of those I shoulds. Like there's things we know we should be doing if we could and we would, and if we had time, but I don't know. I have no idea. No, I'm sorry, which down, it says, it's self-comparison and I shoulds can be a big part of this one, where it's just like, and there's false virtuousness, but the commentators, and so that can be a part of it, but the commentators say that Patanjali really does kind of mean people who are practicing things we perceive as virtues. So it's really a signal for us that can be uncomfortable, because it's usually a sign something in our lives we're not being responsible about, or being honest with ourselves about, or sometimes we're just too tired to do it, and that's okay too, and we need to just practice some compassion and then get to it. But it doesn't mean bless you, but it doesn't mean we get to have a certain texture in the way we speak to the person, like when it's like someone's telling you about something and you're like, oh, that's great, right? Like, I think in yoga, it can be, also yogis have to be careful of, there can be so many shoulds that aren't actually virtues. Is it a virtue to wake up at 4 a.m.? No. You could go live a very virtuous life waking up at midnight, or waking up at 9 a.m. or waking up at 10 a.m. So like sometimes there's these things too, like you need to suss out for yourself what's a real virtue versus what is just something I have kind of taken upon myself as like something to judge myself and others with. Like, is drinking a green smoothie every morning a virtue? I mean, it might be a good habit. It might be a healthy habit. And certainly we can say trying to stay healthy in and of itself could be a virtue. But if it's like the wake up at 4 a.m., drink the green smoothie, do 2 hours of meditation, and then an hour of asana, and then like those aren't necessarily virtues. If then like drinking a green smoothie doesn't necessarily make you nicer or kinder or more patient or compassionate. So think about where that moral compass really is. If you're like, ooh, this is what would get me going, like that person who practices twice a day every day, or whatever the thing is, or who wakes up and meditates at 4 AM or whatever the thing is, take some time. Yeah, I know you don't have time before teacher training ends, but come back to this stuff and review and be like, is that actually a virtue? And if it is a virtue and it bothers you, then examine your own life. And can you maybe step it up a little? But if it's not, then don't do that to yourself or them. So you get to delight in them. Because, I mean, but also I need to maybe talk a little quieter, but like also, how cool is it that there are people doing amazing things in this world, right? And they get to inspire us. And so it's up to us to take that virtue of jealousy and being mean about myself and all of this stuff and being like, you're doing this, you are walking the path ahead of me and helping me to get on it and finding delight in that. Okay, we good on that one? I mean, maybe not good, but you get it? Okay. Equanimity for the virtuous. What do we mean? I mean, we kind of know why the non-virtuous can disturb our mind stuff, right? I mean, the non-virtuous, Hitler. It could be anywhere from, I mean, and it can be as simple as, or things that, again, what's real virtue or not? Do we get really mad at our partner for leaving their socks on the floor next to the laundry basket instead of in it? Is this actually a virtue? Or is it a perceived virtue? Or what, like, so there's this line of like, things that maybe they are virtues, maybe not. And then there's things where it's like, oh, you're definitely breaking that virtue. That's definitely a virtue you're breaking to, like, you've broken all the virtues and caused so much pain and suffering, right? There's this whole spectrum. In yoga, you're likely not gonna see Hitler. But if you do, thank goodness. Why? Yeah, I mean, that might change the course of things. And that is really where you have to get your headspace, because I will say this too, with the world, with things being politically charged and this and that, you might see a student with a bumper sticker on their car of someone or a membership or an organization that you believe or actually is non-virtuous, and then they come into your class. Now, equanimity means you're still going to go. Equanimity means you're going to be steady. It doesn't mean you have to gush over them. And you don't even have to be like, hey, I saw that bumper sticker on your car. I just love it. No. But it does mean if they come in and you perceive them in that light, and they're not doing harm in the moment to anyone in the studio, it is your job to give them just as good of a class as anyone else. And recognize in doing so, perhaps those non-virtues will start to shift. And by the way, they do inevitably if we stick with yoga long enough. Oh my gosh, the person I was when I was 20. And I don't mean politically or anything, but I just mean like, and still, like, I hope when I'm 90, I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, 49 years old and what a mess, like this is what yoga gives us. So I'm not saying you have to make best friends with them, but it is still your job to teach them a good class. Now, if they come in and they're wearing something that is going to be hurtful or offensive, then it's your job to take care of and be compassionate for your whole class. And you're going to ask them to either turn that inside out or to come back when they're wearing something else or this or that, or if they use hate speech or any of these things, right? But if they like it, or here's another thing, if they cut you off in traffic. I had 2 students get in a fight in the parking lot. Oh, I can tell you things I've said. 15 years is a long time. This was very early on, and I heard this screaming outside, and it was 2 students coming to my class, and one cut the other one off, and they about went to blows in the parking lot, and then they both came in my I got them to calm down and then they both came in. But I'm telling you, I got them in different corners. I was like, if you're in here, this is done right now. You either need to go home and cool off or you come in and this is done. Like, and then they were like different people by the time class ended. So recognize that too. But now if it's you, they cut off. You might feel differently. And again, equanimity. And equanimity is really about having boundaries for our mind stuff. It's about being like, no, your ridiculousness is not going to upset my Britties. Right? Like, okay, you flip me off in traffic again, Laura. She's always doing this to me, but I'm not going to be disturbed. I'm gonna stay here. I'm just not gonna do it. Yeah.
I think it's like really being into mind right now is like with a dog, right? If you, that sounds so patronizing, but with a dog, like when they do the bad thing, you say no, a lot of times they just like run off or whatever, but like when they're doing the good thing and you're revealing the good and ignoring the bad, same with toddlers actually, you know, it's like,
It's self-extinguishing.
yeah.
That's what we called it in elementary school, when I was a teacher, is a lot of times the bad behavior, when you like either get them focused on something different or you immediately notice something good, it will just self-extinguish the bad behavior and you don't have to be that way. Thank you. Yeah. And I just will address at large in the world, yoga very specifically says, in fact, the sutras say, ahimsa is nonviolence, and that if we see violence being perpetrated on another, we are participating in it if we just sit back and watch it. Like, so we are still supposed to participate in the world. If you believe in making change in the world, you're supposed to get out and do it. Bhagavad Gita is a great book for this. But equanimity is what allows you to be calm enough to sleep at night, to stop soaking your cells in stress hormones so that you can stay healthy and you can get up and the next day do the good thing again. Yeah? Should we take a break? All right. If I get you out of here early, can you do 10 minutes? Good break? Okay, 7:31, very precise time. I mean, unless you'd rather have a longer break now. Does anyone need this before I?
What's the bottom word under the Y for the non-virtuous?
I mean, do you really want me to read my own handwriting here? It says I should. I should, like, a lot of times, yeah, they just, that sense of, oh, I should be that way. I should, you know.
Perfect.
Yes.
I feel like the Y for non-virtuous is malignant, but I feel like.
Oh, for non, yeah, it can be so many things.
Right, I was gonna say, like.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Indignant, but sometimes it feels like indignant means like a perceived slight, not a real one.
But that can be a perceived slight
Right.
too, so it could be perfect. Yeah.
It's so hard. It's a hard. I get too hot and then I get too cold and I get too hot and I get too cold, so I just put it on and I just take it off.
My boyfriend, like K through 5 art teacher, he's to the point of breakdown. Like today, he had to sit in his head. And it's his first year being an art teacher. He did special education. He can do special education. And this is like a District 11 school. It's a little bit rougher, maybe, but I don't know. Like he wants to stick with it the whole year, but like it's to the point where like things like it's not healthy for him.
Specifically, what is it?
Behaviors. It's behaviors.
the kid.
They are teaching him.
So it's
They're
not
treating him really.
administration.
It's-
I mean, it
It's
could be so
both.
many things.
It's both
Okay.
because the behaviors are not being addressed by the administration as well.
What has he done as far as learning classroom management?
I'm not
She's
sure.
great books.
Okay.
Oh.
Let me. I can grab some paper.
Yeah, let me get myself adjusted and then I'll, yeah, I'm gonna run to the bathroom too.
That's very. I mean, I'm just-
Project.
Yeah.
Crochet.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
That's what I thought.
So I have no idea.
Make something.
Ding, 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 ding. It's like my name. Oh, that's fun. Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's sit anime.
No, I watched anime too.
Yeah, yeah.
I finished two today.
Same time, I watched something.
I can't, my brain, I like.
I tell myself like, yeah. What's it like? Interesting.
No.
It's the same. I have to lie on
Nobody wants.
And I'm tired of looking at my teeth are cold.
No,
Brown.
Yeah. I swallowed it by accident. They were like 4 years or something.
Especially because I don't. I'm technically. Like my mom said, when you turn 25, you can't do that anymore. And I turned 25 last year. Collectively.
I would do that, and like, get all the captions done, and then like, go to plan B. Oh, but- Like, yeah. Take what you can get. Oh,
Reddit scared me.
I like watching, I like working. I like the hell out of it.
Last night I tried to chat with people and
Yeah.
Well, my friend,
I learned that.
oh, you should this Discord. Okay, I was like, okay. And then I I know you could like, I know, yeah, you could just get that place and be like, hey, I'm from this.
Sometimes it's actually cheap. It's built and everything, it's like personal enough to help you, like, so it's something like, depends on what you talk
And like find
I think I'm gonna call it.
These are.
Yes, sir. They're like, yeah, we need insurance.
Yeah.
There's something else. Um, another, a really good training that can might help with discipline stuff of and classroom management, but it's called Brain Gym. But it's not as specific. You'd have to be more creative to figure out how to really use it toward those ends, but it is about getting kids out of certain, they've researched how movements affects our brains. And so how getting kids out of certain literally brain patterns into different ones and how we can use little bits of movement to shift that. But yeah, all of my stuff's kind of dated, but I will say there's so much good stuff out there. And I don't even know if he's out there anymore. I don't know if he's retired, but I would just say too, just start looking on Goodreads for any classroom management or there's another, it's not a positive discipline, it's and it's not high trust, that's Denny. There's another discipline technique that's like it's something about trust or just if it does a little research, it's a really good one and I'm blanking it.
I wish you could get it. His level of art, he really wanted to elevate it. And there's one thing being a teacher, but to
Oh, yeah. All right, let's come around. Yeah. Well, I hope, I'm sorry he hasn't, I feel lucky because my education, it was a huge emphasis. We studied it a lot and I was in, and my district, it was important. I think we did a lot of learning and education. So. Is everyone okay? What is going on tonight? Is that the second one tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, just the first. Okay, only the first, only the first. Okay. Arms overhead, hands forward, inhale. And begin. When you're ready, rest quietly with your eyes closed. Fists at your navel. Inhale and hold. Imagine all of that energy, that kind of wild, excited energy coming in and getting focused from the periphery to the center. When you're ready, start breathing. And rest your hands on your legs. If you feel good, stay here. If you feel like you want the last one, if you're like, I might fall asleep, then stay with me. Palms up, hands out, inhale, retain the breath. Oh, you're all ready to fall asleep. Okay, go. Don't breathe though, I'm holding the breath. You stop when you're ready to stop. Pull in the prana. And stop when you're ready. Close your eyes. Get that mind stuff focused, calm, but also alert and engaged. And here we go. All right. So before we move on from that little section, were there any, we talked about the goal of the teacher is to really take care of yourself so that you can create a space for your students to more likely have their little moments of truth, joy, bliss, awareness, non-suffering. And that if we think about the vrittis that are going to cause us trouble, what are our patterns with humans outside the yoga studio? We can pretty well know that those patterns will stay in the studio. And so if we practice turning those vrittis in a different direction, we'll have more success also as teachers. Any other questions or comments on that section before we move into the next? Okay. So what I would like to do now, and if you don't have one, when I get to you, you can just say pass, or if someone else has taken yours, that's fine. What I want to do this one a little differently than I somehow do it. I'd like to go around, and if you have a question, it could fall under any of these categories or outside of it. It can be about self-care for yoga teachers, fears you might have, like, ooh, what do I do if this happens? Or, oh, I'm scared about this, and you just need some perspective on it right now. If you have questions about managing your classroom management, or about giving or receiving feedback, or anything else, if there's just something you're nervous or fearful or just have on your mind in a very practical way, like, what about when this happens? I would love to go around and get a question from each of you. And what usually I do this at a different point, but it usually we take care of most of these things, and then anything that's left, I'll just quickly hit on. Sound good? Okay, so who has a question, or even just doesn't even have to be a question. It can be this scares me or this concerns me. And if you're thinking I don't have any fears or concerns, then wait till we leave. No, I'm kidding. You got one, Ben?
Yeah. Always thought if an emergency happens
Mm-hmm.
during class, there's, I guess, think of any kind of thing that could be an emergency, but like a medical emergency
Mhm.
or something.
Like, what do you do?
Kind of what kind of things would warrant interrupting the class? Because
Mm.
I've a lot of classes, but I've never been to a class where it was interrupted
Yeah,
or no kind of emergency or something.
yeah. Well, knock on wood, let's keep that up. But
I thought,
it can happen, and it has. There have been things that have happened. So let me address this in several ways. What if an emergency happens? If it's a medical emergency, there's several things in place. So you will, like here anyway, in most places anymore, you would be required to have your first aid and your CPR done. And that will give you some skills that obviously we just can't give you, that will make you have more confidence for certain situations too. If you teach somewhere that doesn't require it, I still highly recommend getting it, just so you can be there and be ready. Know the policy of anywhere you teach. A lot of it might be in the handbook too, so always read those handbooks. We have a nice long one, but it's the thing about our handbook, it's funny, but it's like, it can feel like if you come on board and you're teaching with us or interning with us, it can be like, oh my gosh, but I am promising you, when you go to places that don't have them, it's chaos. Because you have a weird thing come up and there's no procedure for it. And you're just like, what do I do? So in advance, just kind of know basic procedures and stuff too. And I would say this, if it's a situation where you would want to take care of it anywhere outside of the yoga studio. So for instance, if someone falls and hurts themselves in real life, you're going to stop and say, okay, not that the yoga studio is not real life. I have a habit of saying that, and I'm like, it is real life, but out in the world, you know, you're gonna stop and say, are you okay? Can I help you? Right? So you kind of really, it's not that much different. If someone falls over in front of you and they're having a clear medical emergency, you're gonna attend to that and your students are gonna understand. Now, sometimes there's this kind of in between, like we've had a couple things, and I don't want to scare you because there's, thank goodness, they're very rare, but I can't, and it's been so long now, I can't remember if this gal fainted. I think she fainted in class or felt like she was going to, that kind of thing. And so she left and came and sat out here. And in that, the time when that happened, sometimes you will have a student and you can say something like, hey, can you go check on them and I will comp you a class if it's a student you know well, who you know, so you could keep teaching. But also if you're really concerned about the person, you might just say, hey, everyone, I want to go check on that person. I'm gonna have you do 2 more rounds of what we just did on your own, and then I'll be back to let you know where we're at. So it's also okay to just, there's this thing about addressing the elephant. You don't have to do everything in secrecy. Like your whole class is there with you and they're actually kind of on your team. So you can enlist them for support and for help. Like, hey, give me just a minute. I know you're all excited for the next thing, but I want to make sure that the person who just left is okay or whatever. In this case, the person was out here and wanted, her husband called, but what had actually happened was there was a teacher in class too. So if you have a teacher in class, you get to be, but also that means when you're the teacher in class, know that you might be the one who gets sent out to check on the student. And it's just something that it happens rarely, but we do, you know, it could happen and you would just attend to it with the same care that you would anywhere else in the world. Yeah. Other emergencies, like if something really weird, or it doesn't happen often, but every now and then, and I wouldn't even say an emergency, but like here we have, if something happens, you can do an incident report. Like if someone, like we've had a couple people over the years we've had to kick out just for, like I had someone who was stealing. And I caught her because I'm like, you're the only one who's been in every single class. Like, and it sucked because it was someone who over the first 5 years probably brought in over 200 people. Yeah, very devoted, and it was shocking. And I think too, maybe there was just more going on than that, but I also can't have you stealing from students. Or doing weird stuff like taking a bite out of their sandwich and putting it back in their bag. Like, yeah, this is before we had cameras. So, but if you hear like, oh, so-and-so sandwich, someone took a bite out of so-and-so sandwich and put it back, and you don't know who it is, then you'd fill out an incident report, that kind of thing. Yeah. Let's, are we good to go this way? Do you have a question, Laura? Yeah, let's keep going. Okay, we can come back to you. Let me skip forward on the floor.
Continuing education,
Yes.
like knowing more, not necessarily like about other sequences, but having more knowledge about like the sutras and like the real meat of yoga.
Mhm, like the philosophy
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, you know, I'm gonna say we have a 300 hour that goes more into that. Every now and then I offer some stuff, every now and then Austin does. It's really hard to put together things like that. There are things that you can take. I would just always say to there's some great stuff out there, and there's just there's some stuff where it's kind of just Western woo-woo versions of it that I think are bordering on some problematic kind of stuff. And so just do your research, but I can't I don't have a thing where I'm like, go check this out. And I could give you 10,000 books to read, but not continuing education.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, good question though. And then we'll go back to the couch.
Since you've had so many years of experience teaching and practicing, are there any commonly encountered conditions that you've witnessed or situations that you've witnessed that
Yes. Yeah. Do you mean like physical conditions, like as per, or like, oh, my low back, or do you mean?
yes, yeah, that and um more also like situations that aren't physical that someone might present to you in class or after class.
I don't know about patterns of them. I think things that come up for teacher, well, okay, let me answer the first kind of part is you know, you'll see a lot of knee and knee surgeries, knee replacements. You see a lot of that. You just always, anytime you're not sure, it's really kind of on the person to know what they can or can't do. So just have a discussion with them first. And if they're not sure, I would say, you know, I really want you to talk to your doctor about what movements you can or can't do. Particularly like, again, in like 300 hour, there's the things we go into more specifically, and there's time for that. But most as yoga teachers, it's not really our job to, like, we want to work with things and keep people as safe as possible, but we are not medical practitioners, so we can't know every single thing out there. I would say knee surgery is a big one I see a lot of. And so with them, the main thing is just they really literally can't bend their knee as deeply anymore. And any kind of these replacement, like shoulder replacement, hip replacement, it's a loss of range of motion. And they're usually well versed because of PT and stuff and what they need or don't need. But feel okay. It don't feel like you have to know everything. Like, it's really okay to, if you see something on their form or their waiver or on their account with the little red flag and you click on it and it's like hypertension of the da 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 do do do, and you're like, whoa, so many words, I don't even know what this is. It's okay to be like, hey, you know, I'm not a medical professional, I'm a yoga teacher, and I'm not familiar with this. Can you tell me more about it and what you do to stay safe in the classroom and what I can do to support you? So that's totally okay to do. And then as far as situations, I wouldn't say that, I would say more there are situations I see with teachers that become patterns. And this is a great thing to bring up. We talked about this in our mentor group, but I will see people who get out of training and they want to take a break from teaching, and then they get rusty and they never either get back to teaching, or by the time they do, they're terrified. So like, keep practicing. You'll never be as practiced as you are this Sunday. So get teaching again as quickly after that as you can, even though you're tired and you need a little break. Stay with it, because otherwise you can get yourself mentally to where you're like, oh, I have to go so far back, I could never go back. You know, I'll never get there again with it, which isn't true, but that's what people do. But I'll also see teachers do a couple things when they first start teaching. One is their whole world becomes yoga. And I would just say to you that while that's cool, it's also can be a pathway to burnout. And it's important to keep your other interests, your other friends. Like, all of a sudden, it's like people look up and they're like, I only have yoga friends, and I only read yoga books, and I only go to the yoga studio, and all of this, and then too, if you decide you don't want to do yoga anymore, and I hope that never happens, but then it's like, then what do you have? What's it all been for? Like, so, and that will also inform your teaching. You know, if you're a gardener, keep gardening, or if you do a hiking club or something, like, that's going to give you stuff for themes and things too. So keep that keep those pieces of your life up. And within that, I also want to add, I always can tell when a teacher stopped practicing. It's not all about numbers here, but we do have to look at numbers, because, you know, in internships, we don't worry about them, and early on, we don't, but at some point, it's like, well, I just can't pay for no one to come to a class and you to be here for one, It's not always, but a lot of times when I see teachers who are doing fine with numbers and all of a sudden it just goes. And it's because they've stopped doing yoga. And there is something, it's like what we were talking about earlier, like your energy just shifts and it shows up in the classroom when you're not doing yoga. Now, how much yoga do you think a yoga teacher should be doing? What do y'all think? Have you talked about this?
No, but that is my question.
But what?
That is my question.
That's your, oh my goodness. It's almost like we planned it. Well, to answer your question then, but what do you all think? How much yoga should a yoga teacher be doing? Once or twice what? Of what?
Yeah, so like, there's like two parts of that question. It's like asana, and then there's the yamas and yamas, right?
Yeah, and meditate. Yeah, I mean, which is the 8 limbs, yeah. So here's what I would say is remember that yoga is so much more than asana. So please attend to all the other stuff. And if you're having a week where you can't make a class, can you sit down and meditate for 20 minutes? Can you read a book that makes you contemplate and keeps you engaged and excited about it or gives you a different perspective? That said, I think that for one, if you're teaching vinyasa, you need to be taking vinyasa fairly regularly. For you, how often does it need to happen to keep you fresh? It'll vary. If you're teaching 1 class a week and you come once a week, that's probably a pretty good ratio, but can you keep that ratio up if you're teaching 3 classes a week? No, right? And in fact, it might not even be realistic to come to 1 class a week. It might be more realistic to do 2. And do some home practice or things like that. But it is practice within what you're teaching, and also every now and then try to go a little bit out of it to get, you can get inspiration from vinyasa in a yin class that might surprise you. So there's not a set number, there is just a do it. And find what works for you. And remember that there might be weeks where you're like, it's a little bit of home asana every night after work, and that's it. And that's yoga too. So remember, yoga's big. But so just to briefly go back, Gabby, that's one of the big things I see is people just neglect their own practice, either from getting over exuberant about teaching that all of a sudden they're like, and I have no time to practice because I'm teaching 27 classes a week and I'm subbing and everything else. Don't teach 27 classes a week. I just said that as an extreme number. It's really extreme. But that's just such a way to burn out and to actually become resentful of your teaching. So I would say that. Okay.
I have
Yeah.
I think I remember one is kind of silly, but I just wondered, like, if you've ever experienced and what this experience would have looked like if you've ever like had to kick someone out of class or
Yes.
and what that
What's
was
that like? I have had to kick someone out of class. And I've had to kick several people out of the studio. I had to kick a drunk person out of class.
Wondering.
So drugs and alcohol, if you can notice it before they enter the class, it makes your life easier. I had a situation where it was just super busy and I didn't realize it until I got in there and I could smell it, and the behavior was very, I mean, just, and I just had to, here's the thing. You may also have to have discussions about body odor. I've had to have that one. That's the thing, Gabby, I've had to do several times. Oh, that one sucks. I hate that one so much. I hate that one. And everyone does, but here's the thing, if you don't do it, your students are gonna suffer. So anytime you do any of these conversations, you make them as private as possible. Luckily, this person was with his wife who was sober. And so I was able to say, you need to drive him home. You can't be here. If it were not the case, then I would have to rethink how I did it. I'd probably be like, you need to stay here, but you're not practicing, that kind of thing. But it's still like done with dignity and done with, either pull them to the side if it's before and you can, or discreetly talk to them. If you have to talk to someone about odor, whether it be they smell like cigarettes, marijuana, patchouli, lavender, incense, I don't, just all these really harsh smells that can be like, I'm allergic to lavender. So if someone comes in and they've been like bathing in essential oil of lavender, I can't practice next to them. So that's part of why too, as a studio, we have policies around that stuff, is because there's so many people who will be impacted by that, but also because it's a policy, you can say, Amber's just real uptight. Just blame it on me. No, but one thing to do, I've had to talk to several people about body odor, and anytime you can acknowledge it's hard for you too. Like, I'm sorry to have to bring this up with you. This is hard for me also. But then B, if you can relate in any way, like for instance, if someone reeks to high heaven of pot, and I'm not a pot smoker, but if I was, maybe I'd say, I enjoy it too, but I can't come in here smelling like it because, or if like, and Austin's fine with me giving this example. One time he had to talk to, someone about their body odor, and he did the whole thing. It's hard for me to talk to you about this, but I do need to let you know, because I have to protect everyone in here, that your body odor right now is an issue. I totally understand. I actually lost a job when I was 15 because I stunk so bad. Like, but just made it kind of funny, and like the way the person was and the way Austin was, it went off fine. But like, if you can find a point of real empathy and connection, it makes it so much easier. What else?
So my second one is kind of, piggybacking off with Aaron, do you have, if you could provide like a book list, I know like throughout this 12 weeks, we've gotten books and stuff, but if we're like contemplating going to 300 or just to kind of further.
You do have a reading list in your manual.
Okay.
But if there's anything you ever like specifically curious about, I might be able to point you in the right direction, because a lot of us here are big nerds, and I tell you have things in your life other than yoga, but I don't really do much of that. No, I do. But yeah, I did. Lots more than once.
Okay.
No, we went the whole
I
year
know.
before that
I'm
too.
sorry, I'm
Yeah,
teasing.
and I do lots, but I swim, I do things, but it's my passion, and so I can really nerd out if you need me to. Yeah. Okay.
Mine kind of fits the theme of like, what if somebody comes in with like, I don't maliciousness, I guess. I kind of mean in a way like with customer service, where it's just like, just a mean spirit, or you feel unsafe, but it's just you, there's no other teachers in the class.
Okay. That's, I mean, if, kind of depends on where you're teaching, right? Having that happen at the YMCA is different than having that happen here. So and even having that happen here versus Pikes Peak, like, there's security protocols and stuff in our handbook, for one, I would say. If you have a studio that doesn't have protocols like that for you, then ask what you should do. But, it's also, I always say, if something makes you feel unsafe, you can ask someone to leave. Sometimes that makes you feel more unsafe though. So it's also okay to just get through it any way you can, and then let me know about it. Okay. Yeah. All right, what you got?
I'm just wondering how much time you dedicate to coming up with themes and sequencing, once you kind of like, obviously I'm not gonna just jump in and start making sequences, but like once I've become more experienced and gone through 300 hour, like how
Right.
much time do you spend on on that in memory?
It depends how much time you're teaching, for one. So let me also say this. If you can teach more than one class a week, it will help you so much with your memory and your growth as a teacher. I know that's not realistic for everyone, but even if it's like an intern class and have friends over informally on Wednesday nights kind of thing, because what you can do, you kind of start with the sequence and you alter, here's your sequence, then you would alter it a little for, so say you're teaching Tuesday, Friday. Here's your Tuesday sequence. Maybe you put a little more work into that. You only alter it that much, if anything, for Friday. Then you can alter that one that much for Tuesday, and so on. And so you're only, if time is a concern and you don't want to come up with big things, you're just making little tweaks that over time add up to more change. If theming also, I will say this too, the more you're doing it, the easier it starts to get to where it doesn't take as much time. It's just like anything in life, right? Like you just get to where it's more natural and easy. When you teach with us, if you do an internship, we have you just stick with the sequence and then slowly start to change one thing, then another thing. And what you're doing is you do this is you start to download like little things that then you can slip in. So you can be like, oh, that worked really well when I went from crescent to airplane to crescent to warrior 2. And then that's a thing where next time you're like, ooh, I want to throw in some balance. You're like, that one time I did it. So it just makes it, it's one of those things with experience. So I can't tell you a set number of hours or time, but I would just say less is more. I know Laura talks about this with you with sequencing, but less is more. You have your memory of this, just tweak it a little at a time. And each time you do that, you're building your repertoire of what you can do.
Can I ask one more question?
Please, yeah.
In the internship, like if I do decide to go on and do the internship, or do an internship, will we be expected to teach with a theme, or are we just?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and will we be expected to teach with a different theme each time, or just kind of carry an overarching theme throughout our 15 weeks, so?
I think it's good to switch it up. I mean, you could carry an overarching one, but you do need to change it so you're not giving the same week to the same theme to the same students who are coming to your class week after week. So you could do peace, but do variations on it. Yeah, absolutely.
I will ask my question.
Okay. Okay.
Just had a
Sure.
question. So if we do the internship and an opportunity comes up to become certified for the hub. You're
Do
gonna-
like a hot training.
Yeah, and what does that look like, by the way, just a real quick, like, is that
It's a lot less than this.
is it?
Yeah, a lot less. And I'll tell you this, we always need hot teachers. And it's fun. It's just fun. And actually I have had several Vinyasa teachers become such better Vinyasa teachers because they learned to teach hot. Missy Romero is a great example. Her Vinyasa teaching got so much more soft because she's just kind of soft and sweet, buddy Missy, right? And it can show up a bit because hot's rigid. It made her kind of get a little more like stronger, and yeah, so and it's over a few weekends, and it's structured very differently. I don't know off the top of my head.
So it's possible to potentially get certified as you're maybe doing an
Yeah.
internship?
Oh, yeah.
and then Would you need to do, was it like 8 to 15 weeks? I can't remember that first number, but I know up to 15 weeks of each.
Not necessarily. Once you're teaching with us, like let's say you did a hot internship, then, and I don't remember, this is a Kristen question because we come up with stuff and then I'm like, and Kristen, remember it now. But it's you know, there's kind of again sections, but if you're already teaching Vinyasa, you generally do not need to do anywhere near as long of a hot kind of thing. And sometimes we'll do like you just go in with Janine a few times and she gives you the okay. There's a few different pathways. So if you want more specific information, Kristen can get you that. But I can tell you it's not as intense. Yeah.
okay, so whenever you asked us, like, you pop in your head into class and like, think of things.
Mhm.
What if you have to go to the bathroom so bad, and for some reason, like, it's like an emergency to go to the
Mhm.
bathroom?
Well, any physical, any emergency you have come up, I mean, first off, try not to get yourself in that situation. I don't mean dehydrate yourself, but I do mean maybe don't drink the venti, Starbucks, whatever, while you're checking people in and then being like, oh, it's so weird. I'm about to, like, my back teeth are floating and I don't know what's going on. It's so weird every time I teach this class. But things do happen. And if it's, I had a teacher who taught here once and she got a really upset stomach and like, she just had it depends on your personality. She just told students like, things are weird today. If I have to excuse myself, I'm gonna put you in this pose and I'll be back as soon as I can be.
That's fair. Side angle.
Yeah. And also no one has to know why you're you could just say something, like, I am so sorry, I have got to leave the room for 2 minutes, or you can say, or if it's like, if you were gonna have diarrhea, you don't have to say that. You can just say, wow, my bladder's full. Like, bladder full sounds so much better than I'm about to poop my pants. So I'm not saying why,
Something you just ask them.
but I'm just saying you can just be, I'm
Just
just,
for yourself.
it's up to you and your style. She was very much like open about that kind of stuff, but it's okay to go.
From the child's pose, think about their theme, I'm gonna be back in 2 minutes. Kind of
You
thing.
could.
Have it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Seems great.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, that's the first time I've gotten that question.
Yeah, couple are going around or?
You want me to come back to you?
Oh, no, I got a
Or
couple.
would you say,
like,
okay,
How do you recommend going about like? Having one person in your class, because I imagine internship. It's
yes,
probably just gonna be an awkward, hey,
Such-
welcome to class view versus having 7
great
people.
question. Yeah, well, and I will tell you this, and I will not lie. It is so much harder energetically to teach one person than a full class.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather have 40 people any day than one. It just, I don't know what it's just energetically takes more of you to keep that energy up. So here's what I would say. This is where you want to make sure your Ujjayi breath is happening when you teach. You can, because Ujjayi breath changes the whole sound and the energy of the room. That's part of why we have you do it when you teach, right? If it's just you and another person, and if they're not doing their Ujjayi breath, that air gets almost thin. I can't quite explain it. Maybe you've experienced this from some of your practice teaching, but Ujjayi breath will make everything better. Just say to the person, say, hey, you're the only person. I don't want to circle you like a shark, but I'd like to know, do you really like a lot of hands-on assists, or are you kind of middle of the road, or none? And so you can just, and I would say always just address the elephant and be like, hey, you're back. You get another private lesson today. But yeah, for sure it is. I think, and I've heard this from lots of people, it can be harder. Yeah.
Then the other one, a couple people ask, like, how do you do your own practice? I understand going to other people's classes, teaching so much, but what do you do at home? Like, do you practice
Yeah.
sequences? Do you?
Do you mean for like your own yoga practice, or
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
mean to
like
get ready?
yourself.
Okay, are you asking me, or are you saying in general, what do teachers do? Okay, well,
Yes.
I almost don't like to say this because it can be like, oh God, and I don't want you to feel like you have to do this. My dedication is very committed to, I do an hour to 90 minutes of meditation a day. And that is my commitment. And then I do asana as I need to, which is honestly a lot of times at the gym when I'm finishing up. And it's that, like, for me to get that in the way I need to, that's how I do it. Now very few people meditate that much, so it's one of those things where I hate, I almost don't like saying that, because then people feel like they have to do it. It took me decades to get to the point where I could do that. before that, it took me forever of just doing 3 minutes a day. Okay, so that's like, I want you all to hear that right now, 3 minutes a day can get you there. And now I can't imagine not having that. But I think a lot of teachers, for one, you're doing 300-hour, right? Oh, you're gonna have no problem. You're gonna have so much stuff to do. You're gonna be like, leave me alone. Like, because we're gonna give you pranayama practices, meditation practices.
Yeah, but with that, like I'm doing 200 right now, I kind
Uh-huh.
of miss yoga. So.
Yeah. No, you'll be doing more of that stuff, but yeah, you will, with 300-hour, there will be, you'll be practicing, the full sadhana kind of stuff and
Okay.
experimenting with it more so you can figure out, and I would say that to anyone, experiment, find ways to experiment with meditation and pranayama a little bit, bring them into your lives a little more, because those are the things that are really, they're so subtle and they work on such a subtle level that in our world we feel like, but I don't feel it. That it can take us a long time until we do start to feel it. But then when we do, it's like, whoa, that's the stuff right there.
So if you're like injured and you can't do the asana, do you just go extra on the like subtle body stuff on the other ones?
And I'm lucky in this way because I have, I'm very injury prone because of a condition called ankylosing spondylitis, that I used to think was a curse, and it's actually really gotten me onto a path where I have, been almost forced into, like, if I'm going to stick with a yoga practice, I need to focus on some of these other things. It can't just be vinyasa. So for me, that's been actually a blessing. So if you do get injured someday, or let's just say you practice for 50 years, no injury, but then you start to get old 50 years down the line, right? Just remember, it's a blessing because it's opening up other doorways for you. Did I answer your question at all? Okay. Yeah, but explore, have fun, experiment with it. After this, it's, yeah, if we have time, I'll come back to you.
I have 2 questions, but they kind of feed into, well, no, never mind. We already answered one.
Okay.
What do you do if a student's like a little too into you or like a little too into practice?
Okay, if they're too into you, then do the same thing you do anywhere in life. If it starts to get creepy, then you need to let the yoga studio owner know so they can have a discussion about appropriateness. But also, you might want to learn to advocate for yourself and have some hard conversations and be like, hey, I'm sensing something and I want to see if this is accurate. And if it is, I just want to make sure you understand it's not appropriate. If they're too into yoga, I don't really know what that means.
Oh, like I meant like they're too into your class specifically.
Oh, so same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you'll get fans. Yeah, you do get a fan club, and then you just are grateful people really dig your class. Yeah. Again, unless you think there's something uncomfortable or inappropriate about it. Yeah. Okay. What you got?
I have been injured so far.
Oh,
so-
wow. Okay, good job. It
Yeah.
does, yeah, sorry if you're like, I had one and it,
That's for me too.
okay,
I have some.
all right.
What would your advice be if and when you hit the yoga plateau?
Yoga or yoga teaching?
Or maybe a
Or
little
both, little bit of both.
Yeah.
Okay, let me talk about teaching first. So, teaching plateau, again, you have to address, is it because I'm not doing yoga? And if that's the case, do the yoga and make time for it. It also might be you need to try a different style of yoga and get inspired, do another training, read a book. Like, there's so much out there in yoga that honestly, if we get uninspired and I would say this as a practitioner too, as practitioners or teachers, that's really a lack of imagination on our parts. There's just so much out there. So, journal a little and be like, I'm kind of interested in this in life. The other thing I'd say, is it is okay to take a break I don't want to say this about your practice because I don't think I will say this. If you start to give yourself excuses to take a break from your practice because you're burnt out, burnout sometimes is just a mask for lack of dedication. And sometimes it just gets hard and we just have to get through it. And what's on the other side is amazing. So we just have to remind ourselves, it's not that it can feel like burnout, but it's just really us. Like we kind of get to this point in our practices where, at first it's kind of like the unicorns and the butterflies and the rainbows and stuff. And then all of a sudden you just reach your point where you're like, it doesn't feel as good as it did in the early days, or it's different now. And that's where it's like, it's really upon us to push through that and to really do the practice anyway, because then it's asking us to do it even when it's hard. And the more we do that, the more we actually get out of it in the long run. And I know as someone who's tried everything, I've tried not doing it, I've tried, and it's always, I can say now for sure from my life and from people around me, I know that it's worth it. It can not feel that way when you're tired. And when you're just like, oh, if I do one more warrior too, and
Right, like.
yeah, it really is. Like that's oftentimes too, and this is just a truth. I think this is true in life. When we're about to create real change in ourselves, our actual chemistry will be like, no, give me more of the same. Sit on the couch and do this. Don't change. Like it's like the death throes of the thing we want to change about ourselves a lot of times. And so if we can just persevere, oftentimes that's when the big change comes about. Yeah.
Then also with playlists, if you wanted to maybe have a particular theme or something around that, would you have to let your class know ahead of time or?
I would say this, as someone who's shown up, I really have an absolute aversion to certain music from the 70s. I was born in 1975 and there is some music that I just, it kind of depresses me, like Elton John. I know people love Elton John and I'm just like, geez, no, Elton John, no. And I literally have been to 2 different classes with 2 different teachers where they played nothing but that. And I'm like, okay, it's me, so it's okay. But like if a student comes in and they really don't like what you're doing, then it's pretty unfair to them.
Exactly.
So I would say, get the word out there if you're gonna do something like that, and still maybe be creative about throwing in other things. Yeah. Did you have any others?
I think that's good to know. Yeah.
Okay. Thea, what did you have?
It was great reminding me. I've just been so curious on what a good morning, like some good morning rituals, some good morning habits, just to help my own. And I know, like, I think Rebecca said that she will say wrong. Like in her daily times, little things like that. I'm just kind of curious.
What are some good morning? Do any of you have good morning yoga rituals that you do? No.
Yeah, third class.
Go to, but no, that literally that can be a great one. I think Sankalpa is a really powerful one to, because I'm saying this with the recognition that most people don't have a lot. Does anyone in here like have a lot of time in the morning? Most people don't. So it's like, it needs to be quick and effective. So literally, if you can, like that idea of putting a sticky note on your phone so that you feel it when you're turning off your alarm, you don't even have to look at it. When you feel it, it's on call for practice time. And you lie in bed and you repeat your Sankalpa until you can feel it. And I mean, you create an expansive emotion within yourself. So it's not enough to just say, I am joy and peace. I am joy and peace. I am joy. Like that's not going to compete with the other vrittis. We need to give it emotional impact. And that's why if you want that to be the vritti that wins for your day, lie in bed and give yourself, enough time, wake up early enough. So if it takes 10 or 15 minutes, you just stay there till you feel it and you are it and you know it. So I'd say that's a pretty powerful one. I mean, there's so many. You can get up and do pranayama for 5 minutes. You can do pranayama then meditation. You can journal. I mean, I think the answer is in the 8 limbs. Like, you don't need me to tell you what to do.
Fair.
I think you need to sit down and go, what is speaking to me? Like, what have I learned that I could put into a practice? Sure. Oh, here is one thing I will say is a great practice is to, you can pick a yama or niyama. So if you're working with like nonviolence, ahimsa, you could, for 2 weeks, just wake up in the morning and review the day before. How many times was I successful with it and where was I not? What's coming up today where I think it might be an issue? And I might practice harmful behaviors, and what will I do instead? Things like that can be fantastic, yeah. Okay, I kept going because I'm like, she didn't like my answer. Yeah. What else? Anyone?
Before the class too, just to get yourself settled, do some of the same thing, like things.
Same thing. If it's good for first in the morning, it's good for before class. Yeah. And I cannot, Sankalpa experience with the emotion is if it's happening here and now is I can't put enough emphasis on that. It sounds so simple, but it'll change your neurochemistry for the day. You know, you can lie in bed and stress about what you're going to do, or you can get some oxytocin going. Up to you, right? What else? Did you have one?
Yeah, go ahead.
As, you know, now soon to be teachers and whatnot, I guess 300 is veering around.
Mhm.
Is that almost a necessity if we're looking to continue this path and deepen our practice?
It depends what you mean by that. I would say it is a possibility. There's many possibilities. I mean, you could go stay at an ashram in India and not earn any more hours, but we never see you again and you're just, I think that with the right reading and the right practices can carry you a long ways. But I know this from experience as someone who is like, I want to do it myself. It can only carry you so far. So at some point it's good to, just make sure that if you're reading about the sutras, make sure that your interpretation of the commentary you're reading is sound, that you're not just kind of like thinking it means something it doesn't totally mean, that kind of stuff. So, finding some kind of avenue where you can check that, whether it's through a 300-hour or some kind of continuing education or something. I think Greg, I think it's
Okay.
you.
Any red flags, like for studios, students, teachers, yogis that like common patterns that you've seen in the past, or you're like, no?
Yeah, I do have some red flags.
Okay.
And these are maybe personal, so you take them or leave them. I think that sometimes studios are built around a cult of personality. And while we have popular teachers here because they're lovely teachers and they're great teachers, we've really made a point not to do that. Because let me just say this. If you get to a point with your yoga teacher where you are making major life decisions, you can't make a major life decision without speaking to them. You may need to reevaluate your relationship with your because a teacher is really supposed to set you up to claim that empowerment and personal responsibility that yoga gives us, not to take that from you. And right. And there's this whole thing where like, oh, don't get a guru, this or that, but it's not even about that. It's about like, there's this subtle thing that can happen where people, they just kind of give up their own, stakes in the game and give it to someone else. And don't think for themselves anymore. And I've seen it happen around town even, yeah. Nowhere I'm concerned about now, but it could still happen. So that'd be the main thing I'd say. And I also see it with online teachers a lot that people get going with and then they get kind of sucked into it. And then it's like this whole thing, because online you also don't get the same feeling or sense of who they are. It can be a little more tricky and pretty like I had someone wound up following a teacher and going to Germany, and then it turned out it just all of this icky stuff, and I don't think you would need to worry about that though either. That's the thing, your red flags in life outside the studio are going to be your same red flags in here. So the areas where you have problems with boundaries, they'll probably show up somehow in your yoga teaching world. And also I'd say this too, people who are just always about my lineage is the right one, or my way's the right way. There's lots of right ways. Lots of right ways. We can all have our bias and think, but my way's the best, but there's lots of right ones, but it's not, it's just this fundamentalism. Yeah. What else? Did you come up with any?
I'm thinking of workshops.
Yeah, what about them?
Well, what's the protocol? Do we need to, well, I know we need to study, do we come to you as far as being able to teach a workshop?
Yeah, like Kristen puts out every quarter a call for workshops, and then you just have to submit to her by a certain date. And I mean, the thing is, just make sure whatever you want to teach, you have enough experience in to be sharing it. We do, I swear, I don't mean this to be an ad for 300 Hour, but we do a whole section on workshops because my background in education, I think workshops, oftentimes yoga teachers get in there and they just think, because I know something, I can teach it. Like, people do that in a lot of areas in life. Like, there's no real understanding around the educational process or learning theory or anything else. So we do work on that in there. But if you're like, if you feel confident with yourself to do that kind of thing with your background and anything else, just submit something when you see it come around. And I encourage it because I think it's I mean, gosh, people come in with so many great ideas. It's amazing. So it's fun when we get newer teachers even coming in excited for workshops. Yeah. All right. Anything else for you to come up?
I don't think so.
All right.
Everybody's good questions though.
They do. You give them 2 thumbs up. Okay, you got your two thumbs up. Well, if you will give me just a moment, I want to peer through my notes and just see if there's any big key ideas I would be remiss to not share with you. Like, I don't want to wake up 2 a.m. and go, why didn't I tell them this? But I think we kind of covered it. Just make sure you're doing self-care. And part of that is do non-yoga stuff and do yoga stuff. Don't just do yoga teaching, but also have a practice. Oh, I want to share with you this, and I think it's important as new teachers, because I think there's a lot you can get freaked out about, right? I mean, there just is. It's the nature of doing anything new, and especially something you care about. So ask yourself when you're faced with a fear, and this is good for anything in life, but is it because, what's the root of it? Is it because you need to learn a skill, or is it because of negative self-talk? Okay. So if it's because you need to learn a skill, of course, you're working on the skill. That's what an internship is. But if you get out of your internship and you're still freaking out, then it's like, what is the skill? Is it adjusting? Is it like, hone in on what is that skill I really need to clean up or work on, or go watch a teacher I admire and see how they're doing it, that kind of thing. Like, work on, a lot of times it's just a skill that you can learn. If it's negative self-talk, that's where you're going to sankalpa, right? you're going to get in there and you're gonna feel the opposite. You're gonna work your way through that, journal about it, do what you need to do. But sometimes even just when you can identify, and almost all the time it's one or both, but when you can do that, it will actually be empowering for you. And you'll be able to zoom out of your fear and get this more, both a global perspective, so you're not as connected to it, you're not identifying with those bridges as much, but also a plan of action. And that's empowering. Okay, so that's one thing I would say. Sometimes new teachers are afraid of not, what if a teacher comes in and they know a lot more than I do? And it's like, that's okay. Remember, no matter who's in that classroom, they're rooting for you because they want to have a great class. You don't have a single person in there who's not going to grant you grace, who's not going to, most people are not going to care if you say left instead of right. Okay. So get these skills of like talking to yourself, because that's another thing I would say is a pattern I see with new teachers is the self-sabotage, and the negative self-talk can be so huge. So you've got to really command the way you're speaking to yourself in your brain. Oh, okay. One other, I've only got a couple more quick things and then I'll let you out of here, but stay with me till then, okay? Don't over apologize. Especially as new teachers, again, have you heard this one yet? In here, have you heard it? I don't know if it's come up or not for you, but sometimes it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I said left. I'm sorry, I meant elbow, not wrist. I'm sorry. And it's like, that's exhausting for your students because then they feel like they have to take care of you the whole class and make you feel good about class. No, your students don't need to make you feel good about the class. Only apologize if you need to, like you step on the person. I mean, only really try not to apologize unless an apology is actually owed. But if you're just being human, just make a joke or just keep moving, but don't over apologize. And then the last thing I want to emphasize here is that this little bit on managing your class, your students really want you to be in charge when you are in there. So everything you do, again, that means don't over apologize because then they feel like you're not in charge and you have to make you feel better. Have a plan and be willing to break it, but go in with a plan. The more you can do to go in with confidence, the better. Part of this too, you're going to make your students feel more relaxed if you address the elephant in the room. So, my example is really old and no longer holds up, but it used to be, it never failed. I'd be deep in a like 3-legged dog adjustment with their leg up over my shoulder and the CD would start skipping. And I'd be like, oh, and everyone in there is going, does she hear this? Does she know this? It's going to be 45 minutes of this thing, and I've heard stories about like, accidentally getting something on shuffle and it goes to like some crazy song, or it's like, the same song keeps playing over and over. So things like that, if you notice it, just be like, hey, I hear that too, and I'm going to address it as soon as I can. If you get in there and there is an odor, you may not be able to do anything about it, but you can kind of just every now and then open the door and do this. It may do nothing, but it assures students like, okay, Karen's doing the best she can about the person with the sneaky feet. I know it sucks, but at least like somehow just knowing that can make them feel a little better. You may have students fart in class. You're not going to address that elephant. Unless it's like a situation where the smell is like, whoa. And then again, you're just going to kind of gently air things out and you don't have to do it in a rude way, but just, it kind of lets other people know, like you're paying attention. You're not just you're not letting the ship careen toward an iceberg. Right. And if it's you that does it and it's audible, that's when you can say, I'm sorry, and move on. And just, or make a joke, do what you do, but just don't let it defeat you. And I don't mean to put that fear in your head, but it's happened to many students or teachers, pardon me, and that you can make a joke about it somehow, but and the last two things I want to lead you with, teach the class, any class that you have that's described in the publicity and the marketing material, so make sure you read it. What is the class description? I literally finally got my dad to go to a gentle class here. This was years ago. He used to come every Friday night and be the greeter, Austin Top Friday nights, and it was wild in here. There'd be just so many people, and my dad would greet people. We finally got him to take the gentle class that was happening in this room over here. And that teacher that night, instead of doing gentle yoga, was like, I'm gonna do myofascial release with tennis balls tonight. And my dad, this is a man who does like, if you're supposed to do something 10%, he'll do 100%. If you're, I mean, there's no low gear. It's like he complains, he hurts himself with toilet paper by wiping too hard. Like, this is just, so you can imagine what he did with these tennis balls. Instead of like just being gentle, he's like, and he couldn't walk for a week, and he's never come back to yoga since. So it's really not fair to students, and that's an extreme example, but a true one. If you ever see Randy Richmond, tell him to get his butt in here and do yoga. But it's true, you really need to do, you don't get to just, this is something I see with some yoga teachers that are especially free spirits, is they're like, I just wasn't feeling it. Or I just don't feel, or, you know, things like that, or being like, but my class really needs 10 more minutes. And it's like, no, but people might have plans, and we say it's done at this time. So just, again, just make sure you know the start and end time, and you stick to it and you do the thing. And it sounds obvious, but you'd be amazed at some of the stuff I've seen. So that said, I think I will lead it there, other than, thank you. It's been lovely to see you. I'm so excited to see you Sunday. Are you nervous right now? How are you feeling? Saturday, yeah. Sorry, it used to always be on Sunday. So much stuff just happened. You're like, wait a second, what day? Saturday. Excited, nervous, all the things. Okay. Well, go home, get a little extra sleep. It's a little early anyway. It's 8:36. We won't even do the word. Unless you want to say it together. Okay, on the count of 3, say a word, and if you don't have one, just say home. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, grateful. Thank you all. Have a good evening.